introduction, and I'm going to show you all the contestants on the slides before we get started. We do have 4 contestants today who will be presenting at around 10 minutes each. So we are going to try to move forward pretty quickly. So my name's Sam Harlow. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am the online learning librarian here at UNCG. I don't know if we have a lot of people here who are outside of UNCG. If you are, welcome. We're happy to have you. So Greg Bell wanted me to say hello for him. He is at a conference. He's the dean of the graduate school. Him and I came up with this idea actually in 2019, actually before COVID, because we were finding that more and more graduate students were having to present their research online, whether for a dissertation, a job interview, a grant, a postdoc, all kinds of reasons. So this was back, I think, when we were still using WebEx. And so we've done this competition in WebEx, Zoom, and now Teams. But really, it's the idea of being able to make your research accessible for a wide variety of people in a finite amount of time, right? So learning those skills. So here are the competition rules. There are a slide presentation permitted. I think everyone's going to do a slideshow, but no more than 10 slides, including your credit. So the presenters have sent me their slides ahead of time, so we know that they're 10 minutes. So judges, you don't have to count. They all have 10 slides, and they're in the rules there. Webinars are limited to 10 minutes maximum, and if you go over 10 minutes, you're disqualified. So the way that works is that I, like everyone in here probably, has a phone. I'm going to time it on my phone. Because I don't want to interrupt any kind of flow in the chat, I'm going to put a 2-minute warning and a 1-minute warning. All of the presenters saw how this worked in the preliminaries. All of the presenters here for the finals had the highest scores for the preliminary, and that's why they're here. So they know the deal. They are welcome to have phones up to see the chat, 2 screens, things like that, as long as they stay within that 10 minutes. So at 10 minutes, if you're still talking, I will immediately turn my mic on and say stop, just to make sure that we're not just having to disqualify anyone. Webinars are spoken word, so basically just like don't sing it, right? Things like that. Webinars start the minute you start speaking. So the minute the presenter starts speaking, they can take a couple of breaths, take a drink of water, whatever they need to do. That's when I will start the timing. So our judges today, which I'm going to introduce in a second, are using this rubric that is linked here. And it's also found on our website that's there, uncg.libguides.com/www or go.uncg.edu/www. And that's also where you can see all of our past competitors, winners, and past videos, recordings on YouTube of the presentations. Okay, so I just want to give a shout out to our preliminary judges. They had to go to 3 sessions and had 7 students total competing, so that's a lot. They did a great job, but Audrey Brickley from the UNCG School of Nursing, their academic technology specialist, and Rachel Olson from UNCG Libraries, the communication and outreach librarian. So I want to thank them. I don't know if they're here today, but if you are, thank you. So our finalist judges, who are definitely here today, I want to thank y'all and introduce you. So Amy Harris-Hauk is the Assistant Dean for Teaching and Learning for the University Libraries, as well as a full professor, and Jody Petazzoni, Vice Provost and Director, Office of Assessment, Accreditation, and Academic Program Planning, SAC-COC Liaison. So a long title, but thank you, Jody and Amy, for being here. We really appreciate it. So they have the rubrics, and the way it's going to work is that we are going to have the competition here live, and then they are going to email me their scores immediately after they're done scoring. We're going to also have a people's choice at the end. So if you're here to see a friend or a family member, a coworker, a colleague, a student, you need to stay to the end if you can to participate in the People's Choice Award. That is going to be, we're going to do that through Mentimeter, and we'll know immediately that, and we'll also know immediately who the first and second place prizes are. I don't think I said this at the beginning, but they do win a cash prize. So first place gets $300, the second place gets $200, and the People's Choice gets $100. So again, make sure you stay for the People's Choice, as well as to see who got first and second. It can be like first place and People's Choice, second place and People's Choice, or someone else and People's Choice. So it can go a lot of different directions. Okay, so I want to talk about our contestants. So Valessa is from the Department of History with the faculty mentor of Jeff Jones and presenting socialism to the West. And then Brittany is from English with Rissa Applegarth, letting go of grades without letting go of learning. Nushin is from nanoscience. Dr. Dennis Lejeune, I don't know, I might be saying that wrong. I apologize, is using nanotechnology to strengthen antifungal treatments. And Henrika from English with Karen Weiler is the politics of flesh and corporeal consumption in horror fiction. And I'm sorry to the faculty mentors. I got all the names of the contestants, but I should have asked y'all as well. So we're going to go in that order if possible. I know Valessa was saying she had to leave and come back, and if that's okay. So if she's not ready, we'll go on to the next one. But Valessa, are you back in here?
I sure am, and I am ready.
Okay, great.
At least as ready as I'll ever be.
For this fun. This is a fun competition.
Exactly.
Okay, so I am. Ooh, that's my camera. To go to timer. I'm getting my timer out. And again, you remember from preliminaries that you can take a second, take a couple of breaths. I am going to mute and stay with my camera off. Participants, of course, you cannot turn your camera or mic on, but other presenters and judges, we definitely ask that you stay muted for the 10 minutes, and I will kind of monitor that and make sure no one accidentally unmutes or anything. Okay, so I am going to mute and turn my camera off, and Valessa, you take your time, and when you're ready, we will get started.
All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Valessa Agoris. As you saw, I'm a second-year master's student in the history department here at UNCG. And my research is entitled Presenting Socialism to the West, which is an analysis of a Czechoslovakian magazine and how it represents and is reciprocally affected by events in the greater Cold War context. So just a little overview of my presentation is that I'm going to start by laying out my guiding questions. Then I'm going to talk about the magazine itself, which is entitled Czechoslovak Life. So give a little bit of its history, talk a little bit about its contents. Then I'm going to talk about the Prague Spring, which is this vital flashpoint in both Czechoslovak history as a whole, but also specifically to the magazine. And then I'm going to talk about those changes that the magazine undergoes because of the Prague Spring. And then I'm going to conclude with a little bit about the why and the broader implications. So my guiding questions first were, how did the reforms wrought by the Prague Spring impact Czechoslovak literature? And I wasn't looking at long-term prose like novels, but I wanted to look more at daily, like quotidian literature, such as magazines. And the second question was, how did the resulting invasion and suppression of these reforms affect that literature? So to give a little bit about Czechoslovak Life itself, it was a daily life magazine founded in 1948 by Orbis Publishing House, which Orbis Publishing House was an arm of the Culture of Ministry. So it is being directly influenced by the government in Prague. It is an internationally minded magazine. So it's published in English, French, Italian, Swedish, and eventually German. And it's distributed in over 34 countries. It kind of depends on the year, but it's going to places like the US, to Luxembourg, to Mali, to Korea, to Japan. It is going to every continent, to about 3 million subscribers. The only continent that isn't being distributed to is South America. And they often talk about how they want to change that. But the contents of the magazine specifically are focused on the nation's cultural and scientific achievements. So they're talking about the chemical developments, the agricultural developments that they're achieving, conferences where they're able to invite scientists from around the world to Czechoslovakia. But the content is also highly variable. There aren't many sections that stick around for more than a few years. They are often highlighting Czechoslovak poetry, Czechoslovak art. Those are the main pieces that stay the same, but it's very variable and it's often very theoretical. It is a wordy magazine. It is not for the faint of heart, as we'll see in just a second, but it is there to talk about the achievements of the nation and to promote socialism and global peace. And often that comes with a condemnation of the West. So during the Vietnam War, you see a lot of critiques against the war and the violence that is being enacted by the US. Same thing with happenings in the Middle East around that same time. And so this is just a little snapshot of what the magazine looks like. So on the left is the cover and the back of the 1965 edition. So you have, it's highlighting the cultural aspects of Czechoslovakia. So in that lamppost, you see a reflection of the Castle of Prague, so this very important cultural touchstone. And on the back cover, you see the cultural context of Christianity and how important it is, because that is an image of Christ drawing out the taxpayers from the temple. And then on the right, you have the actual inside of the work, which, like I said, is very theoretical, very wordy, but also trying to highlight like hops and barley, like what is it distributing to an international audience. But there are a lot of these very, very topical pieces where you have public opinion coming in. There are sections that are for readers specifically to give their opinions on things. There are letters from the readers. There's a Dear Reader section. So it is very internationally minded and trying to, put everything on a level playing field, so to speak. Now, the Prague Spring begins in 1968 under the first secretary of the Czech Communist Party, Alexander Dubček, and this is a highly influential piece of Czechoslovak history. So Alexander Dubček is trying to get away from this very regimented, very strictly controlled aspect of communism and socialism. So under these reforms, you have this period of liberalization where there's a greater freedom of speech for individuals and a greater freedom of press. There's also political reforms where more political groups are allowed to form. And there's an economic reform in the sense of trying to establish long-term trade agreements with the West that had often been shunned. You also see this split into the Czech and Slovak socialist republics, which is very important for the fomentation of nationalism in both of these republics at the time. But this entire period is framed under the moniker of socialism with a human face, of trying to allow more people to engage with socialism, and especially to get restitution and justice for the often secret and very often unfair executions and trials that happened during the 1950s in Czechoslovakia. And so especially this greater freedom of speech and press highly affects Czechoslovak Life, the magazine, in that you now start to see more sections where they're never saying that socialism is bad. They are constantly for the promotion of socialism, but they are starting to critique the inconsistencies that have existed within the system and how they can possibly reform that. Now, the Soviet Union finds out about this, and Leonid Brezhnev, who's the party official of the Soviet Union at the time, meets with Dubček. They seem to come to an agreement, but then just a little bit later in August, on August 20th, the Warsaw Pact nations of the USSR, Poland, Hungary, and Bulgaria send troops into Czechoslovakia, where they arrest and take into custody Dubček as well as many of the other party leaders, and basically kowtow them into ending these liberalization reforms. They send in armed officials, and while there aren't many violent altercations between military personnel and civilians, it really is the act of sending armed officials and tanks into these public town squares that really foments unrest during this time. And in fact, you see violence continue even into 1969 and 1970, even after the invasion has formally ended, because it only lasted a few days. Now, as for the magazine itself, the changes that we see is this loss of a Dear Reader section, which was this very intimate letter between the editors and the readers. The editors were able to talk about their feelings on imperialism, their feelings on what was going on in the country during this time of the Prague Spring, where they were starting to talk about, the inconsistencies that they had seen. You also see a complete removal and restructure of the editorial board, which is what I have highlighted here with these arrows. So even though they retain a lot of those same people, they're constantly shuffling them around. The editor-in-chief changes 4 times in 5 years. And in fact, the assistant editor that's labeled there, Lenka Renurova, Renorovia, she in 1972 is banned from ever publishing again until the fall of communism. You see criticism of the reforms, whereas the magazine was once very acquiescent and lenient, and in fact, I would argue very supportive of the reforms. It now becomes a criticism of those reforms, and you see a refutation of the violence, and overall, just a complete shift in what the magazine was talking about, specifically about the Prague Spring and about socialism, though it is still, of course, promoting it. And so to end, kind of the why of my research was to bring other nations into this broader Cold War picture. Often when you talk about Czechoslovakia, when I was trying to call up libraries to find these magazines, they would ask, how do you spell Czechoslovakia? I at one point mistakenly said that Czechoslovakia was part of the Soviet Union to a group of people and had nobody correct me. And I think that that is a little bit sad. And that's why I wanted to do this work, is to bring Czechoslovakia and these other Eastern nations back into our broader understanding of the Cold War era, especially during this point, because it is such like a revolutionary flashpoint. But I also wanted to talk about propaganda because it takes many forms, often that are not always perceptible to our audience. And especially like during this time, this is how many abroad were able to get their information about Czechoslovakia. And so just broadly speaking, I think that it's very important that we remain as critical as we can be about all the sources that we have. So thank you.
Great job. You were at 9 minutes and 35 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay, so Amy and Jody, y'all do your thing, comments and scoring. And in the meantime, I think the next one up is it Brittany? Yeah, I have you listed as Crow in the slides.
Yeah,
so
that works. All right, is everyone able to see my screen? Okay.
So we can see your notes, like it's in
okay.
Note view.
In the presenter mode.
Yeah.
Let me go back. There we go.
There you go. No,
Okay.
no worries.
Beautiful.
Okay, and Jody and Amy, either in the chat or unmuting, just let me know when you're ready. Let me set my clock. And presenters, can y'all see the chats?
Mm-hmm.
You can, but Nushin said
yes.
no.
I can, or could.
Okay. I don't know.
I can see them if I open the chat, but it doesn't seem like the notification is popping up for me. I just see a little red dot above the
Yeah, the same
chat,
for me.
so I know there's something in there, but I have
Because my chat says
link it
replying
this
to
way.
external participants, but yeah. Okay. Well, I'm doing the 2-minute warning thing, but again, you can have it up on your own computer too. Y'all are doing great. Okay, so Amy and Jody are ready. So Brittany, you know the deal. I'm going to mute and turn my camera off and take your time and get started when you're ready.
Okay, so hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about letting go of grades without letting go of learning, ungrading in the college classroom. So as mentioned, my name is Brittany Crow, and this presentation comes out of my own teaching practice, my research, and honestly, my frustrations with traditional grading systems. So I want to begin by asking you to think about this question. When students focus on grades, what are they not focusing on? Very often, the answer is learning, risk-taking, creativity, and reflection. So today, I'll walk you through why I began experimenting with ungrading, what it looks like in practice, and what I've learned so far. So let's pause for just a moment. When we talk about grades, assessment, and efficiency in education, we also have to talk about the history of warehousing students. Modern schooling, especially in the US, was shaped by industrial models. So students were organized by age, placed in rows, moved through standardized curricula, and evaluated with uniform metrics. The goal wasn't just learning, it was management, efficiency. So, in many ways, schools were designed to process large numbers of students as quickly and predictably as possible, kind of like an assembly line. And grading became one of the main tools for that. So, what grades do is rank, sort, reward compliance, and they mark success and failure. So, when students become obsessed with points and GPA, that's not a personal flaw, that's a system working exactly as it was designed to. Warehousing models, excuse me, also tend to harm students who don't fit those dominant norms. Students who are first generation, disabled, working class, multilingual, neurodivergent, or otherwise marginalized. So, by experimenting with ungrading, I'm not just changing how I score papers, I'm questioning a long history of treating students like units to be managed instead of people to be developed. Ungrading is just one small way of resisting that capitalist logic. It says you're not a product, you're not a data point, you are a learner in process, and that matters. Traditional grading systems tend to prioritize performance over growth, encourage comparison and competition, increase anxiety, and discourage intellectual risk. So many students learn really quickly how to kind of play the market of school. They learn what gets points, what loses them, how to minimize effort, and how to maximize reward. But that's just not the same thing as deep learning. In fact, grades often become the goal instead of understanding, curiosity, or engagement. So I began asking myself, what does it look like to actually do something different in the classroom? So, ungrading in this context primarily refers to a shift away from traditional letter grades to prioritize student growth, equity, and intrinsic motivation. So, because traditional grading systems tend to reproduce inequality, for me, ungrading is fundamentally an equity practice. Traditional grades often reward students who already have access to time, stability, and institutional knowledge. Meanwhile, students who are working multiple jobs, caregiving, managing disabilities, navigating language barriers, or dealing with systemic racism are often penalized not for lack of intelligence, but for lack of access. Ungrading shifts the focus from performance to process. So instead of asking, how well did you perform this time? Ungrading asks, what did you learn? Where did you struggle? How did you grow? When students are invited to revise, reflect, and self assess, failure stops being a dead end and becomes part of the learning. That also matters for equity because it gives students multiple chances to succeed. It reduces the high stakes pressure that disproportionately harms those marginalized students. It opens space for transparency, dialogue, and trust while also making some of those hidden expectations visible. So students and I talk openly about goals, criteria, and growth, and that shared power also matters. Ungrading doesn't magically erase inequality, but it does interrupt systems that quietly reproduce it, and it centers students as knowledgeable, capable participants in their own education. So here I want to introduce the ungrading spectrum. Ungrading can be really scary for instructors and students alike, but ungrading doesn't have to be all or nothing. So it does exist on a spectrum as shown here. On one end, you have traditional grading with heavy point systems, and on the other end, you have like fully contract-based or self-assessed courses. In between, there are many hybrid models. My own teaching is a mix between labor-based and self-determined grading, which I'll explain shortly. So I still submit final letter grades because I'm required to, but I determine grades in a non-traditional way. So throughout the semester, my students only receive complete or incomplete on assignments, along with written feedback. They also have at least two one-on-one conferences with me. So this system is about flexibility, not perfection. If something is incomplete, students revise it. No penalties, no averaging down. They keep working until learning happens. I also use collaborative and self-assessments throughout the term so students are regularly reflecting on and explaining what they've learned, where they've struggled, and how they've grown. So another core feature of this ungrading model is what I call the feedback loop. Instead of submit, get a grade, move on, the process becomes submit, get feedback, revise, reflect, resubmit, and repeat as many times as needed. So as I mentioned, all assignments are either complete or incomplete. So complete doesn't mean perfect. It just means this work meets those learning goals. If it doesn't yet, students don't get punished, they get guidance. My feedback focuses on questions like what's working here, what's unclear, what's the next step. Students then revise with that feedback in mind. So they're not trying to guess how many points they lost. They're trying to improve, and that shift is huge. It reduces fear, encourages experimentation, normalizes those struggles, and builds persistence. Students learn that learning is iterative, it's a process. This loop is especially powerful for students who've been conditioned to see early mistakes as failure. Here, mistakes are information, they're part of the process. And because students know they can revise until they reach complete, they're more willing to take intellectual risks. Feedback isn't an endpoint anymore, it's an invitation to keep going. So when I talk about ungrading, I also want to be very clear about something. It's not about doing less, it's about doing different kinds of work. In my courses, student learning is grounded in 3 pillars of labor: communication and practice, reflection, and active engagement. So first, communication and practice. Students are brainstorming, writing, speaking, and exercising their content knowledge, all the while articulating their processes and spending time in metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. Those are professional and civic skills, yet in traditional grading systems, we rarely teach them explicitly. Ungrading makes that invisible labor visible. Second, we have reflection. Students regularly pause and ask what worked, what didn't, what will I do differently next time? Reflection turns assignments into learning experiences instead of just products. And third, we have active engagement. Ungrading only works when students participate, they contribute, they take risks. So without engagement, there's nothing to reflect on and nothing to communicate about. So together, these 3 pillars redefine what work looks like in the classroom. It's about practicing agency, developing self-knowledge, and participating in a learning community. That's student labor, and that's what I assess. So one of the questions I get most often about ungrading is, well, how do you decide the final grade? The answer is, I don't decide it alone. I set what I call a core labor threshold that says you must get a certain number of completes on major assignments in order to earn a certain grade. No guessing, no calculating. Further, students do a formal self-evaluation at the end of the term. They look at their revisions, feedback, and reflections to make an evidence-based case for the grade they believe they've earned. This process requires honesty, self-awareness, and critical thinking. In other words, real academic labor. So to sum up, ungrading is not no assessment, and it's definitely not no standards. When you zoom out, what all of this adds up to is a shift in educational values. Traditional grading systems operate like a marketplace. That's not a learning economy, that's a survival economy. When we center labor, we tell students your effort, process, persistence, and learning matter more than your polish, background, or ability to perform under pressure. We stop rewarding students for privilege and start rewarding them for becoming. That's what makes ungrading possible. Not lower standards, better, more honest, and ultimately more just ones. Thank you.
Great job. You were at 9 minutes, 40 seconds. So, okay, Jody and Amy are doing their thing. And next up is Nushin. Yeah. So you can share your screen when you get a chance, Nushin.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's not in present mode, but I can see it.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, Amy is ready too. So you know the spiel. I'm going to mute and turn my camera off and take a breath. And when you start is when I will start timing you.
Hi everyone, I'm Nushin Kyan Bashrad. I'm a PhD candidate of nanoscience. And today I want to talk about my project, which is how we can use science, especially nanotechnology, to increase the efficacy of medication, or at least make a delay for antifungal resistance happening, then we can use the current medication. Maybe you think with this topic why I choose this picture for the first slide. Because at current days, it's my whole life. From the morning to the night, I'm using my laptop. I have my cup of coffee always with me, my notebook and pen to write the note. And when I got tired of my laptop, I just look at my plants and flower on my left side, and then go back to the laptop to do more research. So at first, I want to talk why I choose fungal infection. Because fungal cells live in our body, everywhere in our body, like in our mouth, our throat, our skin, everywhere. But they act like our guests. They don't hurt us. They don't make disease in our body. But if they find a chance, they change their behavior and they start to act like our enemies. Oh, sorry. So, for example, when we get the autoimmune diseases or we get a certain specific medication for a long time, like chemotherapy, our immune system couldn't work the same as when we are healthy. So it gives a chance to yeast cells to change their behavior and start to be aggressive and attack our body like the enemies. So why does it matter? Because Candidemia is the second most common bloodstream infection, and if it happens, it increases the mortality rate to 15 to 40%. And also, the treatment for this kind of patient is very expensive. It's around $40,000 per episode, and we need more than one episode to treating one single patient. So drug resistance is a serious threat for human. So why drug resistance happen? When it happen? Why? How we can control it? So Candida albicans or any kind of yeast cell is like an oval shape without any tail. And then when they find a chance, they start to stick on the surface and then make a tail that we call it filamentous. In this situation, we can use antifungal drugs and help immune system to go and find them and kill them. But if the yeast cells find a chance and insert the tail in the tissue, they start to be drug resistant. All of our current drugs can't work, and we probably lose our patient. So what is our goal? We want to stop the process here, then we can use the current medication to treat the patient, or at least make a delay between this step and this step, then the doctors have more time to treat the patient. So what I did with nanoscience, I used nanoscience to make a nanofiber. Nanofiber is like the clothes that you wear it right now, but it's made from very, very tiny fibers. It's very tinier than one single hair, and you can see them with naked eye. We need a specific microscope to look at them and see where they are and how they look like. So I exposed the Candida albicans cell yeast cells on these nanofibers and look at them on a specific time. After 30 minutes exposure to nanofiber, I look at the Candida albicans cell and I saw all of them are like an oval shape, and you can see in the schematic picture also. And after 2 hours, I look at them again and I see, oh, they start to go and stay between the layers instead of being on the surface. And after 24 hours, when I look at them, we see less number of the cells on the surface. So what's going on? They are dead? They're alive? What's happening for them? So after that, I start to count the cells each hour. For the first 10 hours, I see the number of the cells is increasing, but after 10 hours, they start to decrease the number of the cells. But after 24 hours, we see the sharp decreasing the number of the cells. But at this moment, we didn't know that they are alive, they are dead, they are functioning, or what's happening for them. So I shake them and vortex them out to count the cells out and count the cells again and say, yes, all the cells are alive, but they are trapped and hiding between the layers. So how it can help us for the antifungal treatment, how we can use it for the clinical way. So I went one step deeper and check how they really respond in a genetic level. I know at first you see this diagram is very hard to understand, but I will try to explain it in an easy way. You can just imagine one single cell as a company. That company has different departments, and each department has several employees. So you can count each cell, each gene as a single employee that work with some other genes as a colleague and make some production for each department, and the cells behave normally. So what happened if something happened for one department, then they work differently. So as you can see here, the colors. The red color that you can see here, it means that these genes work harder. And if they are blue, it means they got lazy or they work less than normal situation. And in the left side, you see the heat map diagram that I checked one single genes in 6 different conditions, 6 different times to see how they really behave. There are a lot of thousands of genes or employee in each cells, but I choose most significant genes, that it's 50 most significant genes, that they act like a CEO or administrative staff in the company. So if they change their behavior, they work harder or they work less, it affects on the productivity of the company or the cells. And what is the product of the cells? It can be enzyme, it can be protein, it can be energy, anything. But maybe you think, so when they are work harder, so it's beneficial because they have more product, but it's not correct, because when one employee start to work hard in one department, other colleague, they have to work harder and make more product from that department that is not necessary for the cell. And also in in other department, maybe some employees start to be lazy, they don't work enough that they have to, and then in effect on the other department that they are working parallel with them. So in that way, we are looking at the genetic level to see how these changing of the genes working in the cells can affect on the cell's behavior. And in the right diagram, we call it volcano plot. It showed that how many times these genes work harder or how many times these genes work less. So in that way, we can use that changing behavior to use in the treatment in a clinical way. So as a summary, I can say when we only use the current antifungal drugs, it gives the chance to the yeast cells to make a tail for them, and these tail act like a shield for them. So drug resistance happen for them, so the current drugs will not work after a while. But if we add something new, like nanofibers, it helps the drugs to work better because it get the chance from the yeast cells to make a tail, so there is no shield for them. Yes, they grew, but it delayed the drug resistance happening for them, and it gave the chance to the doctors to have more time to use the medication to treat the patient. So now it's the time to choose. Do you want a happy and free Candida albicans or trapped Candida albicans but happy patient and doctors? Thank you.
Good job. Okay, you were at 9 minutes, 10 seconds. Y'all are doing great with timing. Same deal. Henrika, when you're ready, you can share. And Amy and Jody will score, write their comments, and then we'll get going. Jody and Amy are ready, so you can share your screen when you get a chance.
All right.
Okay, I see it. It is in present mode.
Okay.
You know the deal. I'm going to mute and turn my camera off. Take your time and then get started.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henrika, and I will be talking about the politics of flesh and corporeal consumption in horror fiction. And this presentation comes out of my dissertation research. Before I say more about what I mean by corporeal consumption, allow me to briefly explain how I came to do this kind of research. So when I first started my doctoral studies in the English department in 2023, I had noticed that the term cannibalism kept appearing in newspaper and magazine headlines more than usual. And I've pasted some examples of recent headlines on the slide here. As some of these headlines show, we've recently witnessed a surge of literature, film, television, and other media that features cannibalism as the central trope. You may also have seen headlines such as Elon Musk thinks cannibals are invading the United States, or you might have seen Kristi Noem talk about deporting cannibals from the United States. And so cannibalism is not only trendy in pop culture, but it also keeps appearing in political rallies and statements from right-wing influencers, usually as a part of broader anti-immigration rhetoric. Now, our fascination with people eating isn't new, and neither is the practice of using cannibalism accusations as a way to dehumanize a group of people, whether it's immigrants or indigenous people. Both of these things reach back centuries, even millennia. But I feel that there is something in our current moment and in the 2020s that has really directed our attention towards what is probably the greatest taboo known to mankind. And I started this research in an effort to understand why that was the case. So then let's talk about corporeal consumption a little bit. Even though my main focus in this presentation is on cannibalism, in my research, I've opted to use the term corporeal consumption to encompass not only cannibalism, but also other forms of bodily consumption. And my definition for the term comes from these two scholars that I've quoted here, Anna Lavis and Emma Jane Abbots, and they define corporeal consumption as all the ways in which, quote, bodies are both consumed by and consumers of the world around them. So that definition reminds us that consumption isn't always synonymous with eating, but it's a broader term that can refer to any type of usage that reduces or weakens a resource. And in the case of corporeal consumption, the resource that's being used is the body. And so cannibalism is probably the most radical and controversial form of corporeal consumption, but we can also understand the term as including things like organ donations, blood transfusions, vampirism, as well as the consumption of animal flesh, because animals also have bodies. And then in a more abstract sense, corporeal consumption can also include things like the consumption of labor or sexual consumption, as you'll see during the rest of this presentation. Then I'll say a couple things about my theoretical framework. I rely heavily on two different scholarly works. And the first one is Carol J. Adams's book, The Sexual Politics of Meat, where she discusses the connections between our meat-consuming culture and the patriarchy. And you can see the image from her book on the side here. And as that image suggests, one of her main arguments is that animals and women are both put through a process of, and this is a direct quote, objectification, fragmentation, and consumption. And so in the case of women, the consumption is oftentimes sexual. And the second theoretical text that I use a lot in this study is Nancy Fraser's book, Cannibal Capitalism, where she argues that capitalism is at the root of racial inequality, environmental destruction, and even the downfall of democracy. So then here's my main thesis. Many of the texts that I discuss in this study, and I will show you a couple examples in a moment, they are about cannibalism on the surface, but a closer reading will show us that cannibalism is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting in these stories thematically. It usually functions as a metaphor for things like capitalist violence, environmental destruction, gendered violence, all these other issues that plague our contemporary lives. And I believe that through its very gruesome depictions of corporeal consumption, especially cannibalism, horror fiction allows us to reflect on how we consume the world, and then it forces us to confront the oftentimes very bloody consequences of that consumption. So then I'll show you a couple examples to further illustrate what I'm trying to do in this study. My first example is a novel called Tender is the Flesh by Argentinian author Agustina Bastarrica. And Tender is the Flesh is a dystopian story about a society where animal flesh is no longer safe for human consumption. And this has driven big meat corporations with the help of the government to raise and slaughter human beings for what they call special meat. And the people who end up butchered and eaten in the novel are poor people, members of marginalized communities, undocumented immigrants. These are also the populations that capitalism usually exploits the most. Therefore, Bastarrica's novel offers us one really horrifying vision of a capitalist system that, in this case, literally consumes human lives for the sake of profit. The novel also does a great job of challenging the human-animal divide, and it forces us to confront the really uncomfortable reality of the violence that takes place in slaughterhouses and meat processing plants. Tender as the Flesh is not a novel you want to read before you bite into your Big Mac. The novel involves really detailed descriptions of humans being kept in awful conditions and being butchered like animals, which then highlights the brutality of factory farming specifically. And the second example I have here, this is maybe a little bit more lighthearted in tone than Tender is the Flesh. This is Mimi Cave's debut film from 2022 called Fresh. And Fresh tells the story of a young woman called Noah who has been consistently disappointed by dating apps and the awful men that she has been on dates with. And then right when she's about to give up all hope, she encounters a seemingly perfect man called Steve at a grocery store, and the two of them fall in love very quickly. It turns out, however, that Steve has some very unsavory appetites. Not only is Steve a cannibal himself, but he lures women into his house and keeps them captive while he surgically removes parts of their bodies and then sells those body parts to rich men who have also developed a taste for human flesh. Fresh, then, is a witty critique of the horrors of modern dating, but it's also a commentary on wealth disparity and a system where a small group of ultra-wealthy people exploit the lower class. Additionally, we can read the film as an allegory for the commodification and sexual consumption of women's bodies. So why should we care and what do we do with this? I argue that a close examination of corporeal consumption in books like Tender is the Flesh or films like Fresh, they can create productive discomfort, they can help us confront our own complicity in violence, and they can also motivate us to imagine models of consumption that are more sustainable and also informed by ethics of care. If we want to reduce violence, we need to stop distancing ourselves from production processes. And we also need to understand that our well-being is dependent on the well-being of others, and that includes both human and non-human. That kind of change will never happen unless we are willing to recognize the damage that we have done, restore what can be restored, and put in the effort to prevent further harm. And I believe that horror fiction, out of all the genres out there, can get us there faster. Changing our consumption habits is really hard and unpleasant work, which is why horror fiction and its capacity to really shock us to our core might be exactly the wake-up call that we need. Thank you.
Good job. I didn't even put my 1 minute warning in there. You were at 8 minutes and 45 seconds. So good job. Okay. The judges are gonna finish up. Amy and Jody, you either email me or chat me privately the total score. And y'all, the contestants, the final decision is final. But if you want to see the comments after, anonymous comments after, just write me an email and let me know. But we will not share, of course, the rubrics in this session. We will just share the winners. So as they are finishing up, the moment we've all been waiting for is the People's Choice Award. So this should take you to a poll with the contestant's name and a title. Here, please let me know if that doesn't work. You should be able to submit. That's how we're going to vote for People's Choice. I sure there might be a way to manipulate this, but so we're kind of going on honor system. I see that there's around 59 people in the room. So if I see like 100 people voting, right, we're going to reset it and try again. So it's we're all gonna try it out. Okay, so and also while we're waiting for the judging scores to come in, you can see the chat is giving y'all praise. Feel free to tell your friends, families hello in the chat. I know y'all can't unmute, and that's fine. So yeah, talk about what everyone's going to watch this weekend. Read or watch. I've been watching the Olympics at night. It's mostly what I've been doing. I'm still riding high on the Alyssa Liu, greatness, I think. Women's hockey. Okay, I'm gonna mute and start scoring. I haven't heard anything. Click on the link to be taken to the voting page. So did the link not work? She put the link in the chat. Okay, yes. The link's working. Someone thumbs up it. Okay, Catherine said it worked. Sorry. I was like, one person confirms. Yeah, it worked. People are asking about it. Okay. Yeah, sorry. It's go.uncg.edu/www people too, if it gets pushed down in the chat. I will drop it here. And let me just mute real fast. Okay. First, we'll do the People's Choice. And I do want to say it was really close. I had to do math. Sorry for the pause. I was like adding it up. So let me pull the People's Choice up. Now I have it up. And we will start that. So okay, great. Okay. I'm final chance for People's Choice because I'm about to share my screen. Get ready. It's also close. Nushin, you are the People's Choice winner. Again, close one. Congratulations. So great job. Okay. And now to announce the second place winner, it is Enrica. Congratulations. Yay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Somehow I tried to do all this in the head. I guess I turned off the applause. Usually, you'll see all the applause. I don't know. We're doing our best with setting up webinars and Teams. And now for our first place winner, it is Brittany. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes. So everyone did great. Thank you all. Again, it was close scoring. I had to do math. It was not clear just by looking at the scores. I had to add them together. So great job, Brittany. Great job, Henrika. Great job, Valessa, and great job, Nushin. You all did great. It was close. It was fun. It was a good year for webinars worth watching. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. This doesn't really work without people coming to the finals because we need, a great audience. We need the People's Choice. We love for people to see our great graduate students' research. This is our website, www.go.uncg.edu/www. The recording of this, edited out with the stuff at the beginning, maybe even some of the stuff at the end, will be edited out and put on YouTube and captioned as soon as I am able. And other than that, my email is slharlow@uncg.edu. If you have any questions. And thank you all. Happy Friday. We hit it right before 3. I'm really proud of us all.
You.
So thanks again, Amy and Jody. Happy Friday. And
this was so fun. And if I'm not judging next year, I'm definitely attending.
Yes, great. Yeah, well,
it was great. Y'all were amazing. Like,
yeah, it was really good.
You were all just